Like in all of life, we each have our little piece of life. And if we can each find a way to use our piece of life the best we can, then, and everybody does that, then all of life becomes better. Like I tend to be very aggressive in races. So if you can get to that point where it's like, I'm just going to go all in and I don't care what happens because I'm just really curious to see what happens if I go all in. And by chance I can hang on, the outcome's going to be like so fantastic. But doing that is really risky. You kind of have to admit that, okay, this might totally blow up, but I'm going to take the risk.
Listen, Stokely, where we try to be involved, to listen and learn for us all to evolve. So welcome to you and welcome the world. We hope you enjoy the stories to be told.
Welcome to Stokely, a podcast where we explore environmental conservation, our human mindset and adventure. Each week we invite you into conversation with people from all walks of life, people who truly inspire us and set about contributing to a greater place for us all to call home. So please take some time to settle in for our conversation today with our host, Maya.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Stokely. I'm really glad you're here, and I hope you've been well during the current times. Today I get to speak with Zach Miller, and I get to have an incredibly thoughtful conversation with him. Zach's an accomplished ultra runner, achieving some of the highest results in some of the most prestigious and well-known races all around the world. Zach really drew my attention when I started to read a lot of his columns on I Run Far. They definitely spoke to a deeper sense of thought around running and the world that it's created for him, and the world that it's created for a lot of people in the trail and ultra running space as professionals and also as people that do the sport just out of the pure love for it. I just want to say that this conversation was really incredible for me personally because I got to speak to Zach on a deeper level. I've wanted to have this conversation for a long time, and I'm really grateful for Zach for his vulnerability and for opening up and really considering his answers, and big shout out to Zach for that. And I really hope everyone else gets something out of this conversation as much as I did. I think it's one that will keep getting your thoughts attracted to it once you're well away from it and on the trails and doing your own thing. So thanks again for joining, and before we get on with the conversation, I'd just like to take a moment to thank the traditional custodians upon the lands where this podcast is created and listened to, and I'd like to pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging their everlasting connection to land, waters and culture. So I really hope you enjoy. There's a couple of silent moments in here where we're both deep in thought, but just let them pass, and I hope you really enjoy what the conversation holds. And I look forward to hearing what you think. It'd be great if you could let us know. We always really appreciate it. So here we go, Zach Miller. Hey Zach, so where do you find yourself right now?
That's a good question. I'm actually in Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. I was in Colorado for like 6 years, and then I finished up caretaking at bar camp. It was great, but it was time for a change. So I wrapped that up in June, and then I came back home to spend some time with the family and work on some stuff here. And then I'll be heading out again at some point, but just kind of been hunkered down here during the pandemic.
Yeah. How have you found that, the whole change in the world's operations at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I came down kind of at a super interesting time. Like I spent 5 years living on the side of a mountain, like separated from not separated from everybody, but just like nobody lived near me. I was in the middle of the woods. I saw people, but I just didn't really live in a town. And then I came down and it was like the whole world was like in chaos. So, which up there we just kind of, I mean, we were still had some of it, but we kind of hid. Actually, I was supposed to leave sooner. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, they don't really want anybody around each other. And I'm just kind of in the middle of the woods. So, like, I might as well just stay right here. So I actually kind of stayed a little longer. But then by June, it was like, well, this doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So I just kind of wrapped up and made my way back to Pennsylvania. But yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's funny to think of like the cultural shift of like we went from like a society of like no mask wearing basically to like a society where like everybody, well, not everybody, but like it's the social norm to wear a mask. Like that used to be something you just saw every now and then on an airplane or something, and now it's just like just become part of our daily attire. So like that's really kind of bizarre when I think about it. And yeah, I don't know, like especially in the US, things have just been wild with we've really had our struggles with trying to control the pandemic, and then with the political situation, it's just been a really wild ride for us. But I mean, I'm doing all right. Like I haven't had the virus. So I'm really thankful for that. And, generally I haven't, had any like really detrimental impacts. But I know a lot of other people have, so I've been fortunate.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear like how do you deal with the turmoil that's happening in like your country specifically? Because, from afar over here, we get fed a certain amount of media through the mainstream, and then you can obviously like delve deeper into more independent sources of news. But yeah, it does seem and also speaking to a lot of friends that are based in the US and from the US, it definitely seems pretty hectic. Like, how do you deal with that on like with your own personal life, and do you get involved in it? Do you have like do you just abstain from all sources of media and just try to like ignore it in a way, or like what's your way of going through it all?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for the years where I was at bar camp, I was pretty removed from it. Like if I wanted to know what was going on and be a part of it, I could. But because of where we were, it was also really easy to just kind of like turn it off. But when you live more in the mainstream, like when you live in a town, you kind of are subject to it, like whether you want to be or not. Like, you go to the store and there's somebody grumbling about what the president just did or didn't do, or what happened in the election, or, you stand in a waiting room and maybe the news is on, or, you're in somebody else's house and the news is on. So like, you just kind of like or you turn on the radio and it's there. So it's just kind of not forced, but it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, kind of like forced upon you more. Fortunately for me, I feel like I don't really get stressed out about it. At least I feel like I don't. I mean, not that I don't care about it. It just doesn't really like, it just doesn't really stress me out. Like, I'll be like, these are crazy times, and this is like, these topics are super important, and we need to fix like this issue or that issue or address this. But at the end of the day, it doesn't keep me up at night. I think that's just my personality. It's just kind of how I deal with life. Like I see it, but I don't really feel like it affects my well-being. But it is like depressing if you like sit down, like tonight at dinner, the news was on, and I mean, it was just like, you sit there and you're just like, man, it's just like one thing after another of like, it was like the pandemic, out of control, vaccinations too slow, like, you know, the politics things of, President Biden trying to do something but not having enough support, and still trying to impeach Trump and all of this. So it's just like, man, we need a bit of a splash of good news here somewhere.
Yeah.
But there are, I think, I forget what it was, but I think there was one story in there somewhere tonight that was positive. I can't remember what it was now.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? It's just like, well, surely there are some good things happening that we could, even just give like 30% of the mainstream media, like just keep 30% of it upbeat, and then the rest can be problems that we're trying to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of it has been like, I have, like, as difficult as the pandemic has been for the entire world, really, I have really appreciated seeing the creative and positive responses to it. Like in the United States, when we had Halloween and all the kids usually go around and get, collect candy from people at their houses, like that wasn't a very like COVID friendly activity this year. So people were building these like elaborate things to still give out candy in a socially distant manner, and they were like building these these zip lines off their porches, and these like tubes and things that like, they would like shoot this candy down to like all these kids in the neighborhood. And it was great. I was like, man, if we didn't have the pandemic, we wouldn't have seen this type of stuff. And because we had the pandemic, which, not that I want the pandemic, but because we did, people got creative and they did this neat, all this heartwarming stuff. So like that was pretty cool. And like there was another really cool story this year, which was actually really sad, but also really cool, because the whole like racial injustice issue has been really big in the United States this year after George Floyd and just so many other events. And there was, I don't know if you would have caught it on your end of the world, but there was this story about these people who, when they decorated for Christmas, they put a blow up Santa Claus in their yard, but they're a black family, so they put up a black Santa Claus. And there were some people in the neighborhood or somewhere that had a problem with it, and they wrote them this nasty letter about how they need to remove their black Santa Claus from their yard. And in response, all these other people in the neighborhood, they heard about it, and they all started going out and buying black Santa Clauses and blowing them up in their yard. And there's this neat news story of this like old, like white woman, and she's like, yeah, I told my husband to get the biggest one he could find. And they were all just like showing their support for this family. And it was just really neat. Like it came out of a bad situation. Like you don't want that type of, attack on someone, but the goodness of humanity was shining through in response to it.
Yeah. It's beautiful, eh? It kind of, there's a lot of hope in that. And I just think that, it's so good to be able to hear that, on the surface, it could seem like, oh yeah, that one person that writes the letter speaks for the majority, but it's like the complete opposite, right? Which is amazing.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it is the opposite. So it's nice to be reminded that it's, that there's still good out there, and that there's a lot of good out there, even if sometimes it feels like there's nothing but bad.
Yeah. Have you found it, like, how have you found it with all of this coming to the surface more and more throughout the last kind of year and a bit? Like, have you put yourself out there and your own opinions out there more, or have you been in a situation where you've acted differently because of the prevalence of how ridiculous the situation is with the system and systematic racism and things like that?
Yeah. I don't feel like I've ever like truly really put myself out there. I mean, I've definitely like, posted a few things here and there on social media that, give it, that were supportive of one way or the other, or give an indication of how I feel. And I was, definitely into doing that. But I don't think I've done near the level of things that, some people in the world have. Like some people have really laid themselves down for some of these causes. And, everybody has a different voice and chooses to navigate things a different way. I think, I mean, I do have to think, like, when I post something now, I do realize that, like, okay, if I say this, there's going to be some people who are not okay with it, and they're going to maybe call me out. There's going to be some people who just like, stop following, which is fine. I did have to wonder a bit, like around the time of the election, I posted a little bit of stuff, and, and if you want to dig in Instagram, you can see a lot of figures and things, and you can see like how many people have followed you and how many have unfollowed you. And I did have to wonder kind of around that time, like, I wonder if like some of the stuff I've said or some of the stuff that I've like put out there has led some people to just, unfollow, which is, totally fine. Like it's social media. You do what you want with it, for the most part. But I never felt like it was like a super, like I was really under attack. I mean, maybe a few Facebook comments or something where somebody's like, do you really believe this? And it's like, yeah, I do. Like I support this, but yeah, I think one thing moving forward, or one thing that I have thought about lately, is that at least in the United States, politics has always kind of been this thing you just don't talk about. Like it's kind of socially unacceptable to discuss politics, at least in certain conversations. It's just kind of like this private matter. And I got to thinking this year, I was like, well, maybe this is part of our problem. Like maybe part of our problem here in the US is that we view this as such a private, like holy thing. Like maybe if we actually came out and like expressed our opinions and had more conversations, we would like come to better solutions, and people would like think more about, the vote they're casting or the thing they're supporting and the impact that has, rather than, maybe for years, like it's been well thought out, or maybe they're just going through the emotions and doing the same thing they've always done and not really thinking very deeply about it. And I think that's easy to do if it's this thing that you just never talk about, And so like, I guess I see productive conversations as something that probably really needs to happen going forward. And it's just kind of a matter of figuring out how to have those conversations, because everybody can get in a screaming match, but that's also not always very productive.
Yeah, I think that's very unproductive. Yeah, it's it certainly may feel good in some regards, but it doesn't really lead it anywhere, does it?
Yeah, no. I mean, it kind of leads somewhere, but yeah, it could lead somewhere in a more efficient manner, and in a way that doesn't do so much harm.
Yeah. It's I find it super interesting to talk about that situation of, like we all have our views and our opinions, and I guess through the sport of trail and ultra running, these platforms have come about over the last, 7 years, I suppose. Like I've been around kind of the circle for about 6 years now, and it's super interesting to see how, like every individual now has a platform to be able to put out thoughts and opinions, information, even some entertainment every now and again. And I've really resonated with a lot of what you've said, and in the columns that you write for I Run Far, and I just feel like you're an incredible athlete, and you've achieved some incredible things throughout the sport, but you choose to write about some really kind of reflective topics, and you go a bit deeper than like, I'm a fast runner and that's all I ever want to do. Like, and that's all it's ever about, is to get the medal and get the podium. How long, like, have you always been a writer, and is that something that's pretty natural to you, and the topics that you write about, how do you choose those, and how do they come about?
Yeah. It's still funny for me to think of myself as a writer, it's maybe not funny to think of myself as a writer. It's just funny to think that I do it, like that it's something I still do, and that like I do it for a website for I Run Far, because coming up in school, like writing was not really what I liked. I was more into the math and the sciences, mainly the math. I really like math. So in school, I studied engineering. Writing was just something I did because like we had to. And I usually did well with it, but not really because I enjoyed it. I think it was more just because like it was a class in school and I wanted to get a good grade. So I just worked hard at it. So it wasn't really till like after college and I like started traveling on the ship. I started like a little blog, and I would write things from time to time. And I guess that was like an important part of my life, because it was like I was doing all this traveling and having all these cool experiences. So it made sense to like put it down in words. And I wasn't writing it for a job or anything. I was just writing it like to share it. And I guess that was how Megan Hicks of I Run Far caught on to my writing. And then she I guess she liked it and she asked me to write for them. So I started doing that. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Over the years, it feels like it's gotten harder because when I first started writing for I Run Far, it was like I hadn't written anything yet. So I had so much like to pick from. And then as I go on, I'm like, every article, it's like, man, this just keeps getting harder, because like I don't want to repeat the same thing I wrote last time. But like I feel like I've only got so much in, like there's only so much inside me. So which is good, because then I guess it makes me dig deeper. But it can like, there's just some days I really feel like my well is tapped and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But Megan tells me I'm a natural writer because of like, I kind of have to like wait for inspiration, and like, it'll be like the process of writing for me is kind of like, okay, I need to write a story. And then it's like, okay, several days of like, what am I going to write? I don't know. I have nothing. What am I going to write? I don't know. I have nothing. What am I going to write? I don't know. I have nothing. And then in like the last corner of the process, it's like, okay, this has to happen. And then like I get something, and then I just like do it like all like I write it like usually fairly quickly. Like I'm just like, okay. And then I just like cram it in. And I don't know, Megan says that's kind of like how writers and musicians are. They just kind of like, they can't do it until they're like under pressure, and I don't know, they're like up against something. So I don't know, maybe that's a good sign. I don't know, it can feel stressful when I'm doing it. But yeah, the topics that I come up with, I usually just, like I said, I kind of have to have some sort of inspiration. So I usually just try and draw it from like something I'm experiencing at the time. So like the stuff that I'm going through, or sometimes I'll be out on a run or a ride or something, and there'll just be a thought that I get, something that hits me, and the wheels will start spinning, and then it'll come off of that. So yeah, that's basically the process for like the selection of the topic.
So it's definitely it's something that you come across mainly in the moment of doing. Is it something that you love, or is it something that you hate? Is it like, what is it that you, if you had a deadline and you're like, okay, I've got like 24 hours until I need to write this thing, what would be your next step to get that like inspirational hit?
I feel like a lot of procrastination. Like, I feel like that's how it goes. It's like when I have to write an article, that's when I do like everything else that I've been procrastinating. Because it's like, okay, what's everything I can do that's not this? And I start doing those things, and then eventually like and then it's like, well, there's nothing else left to do, so now I have to do this. That's maybe a little exaggeration, but that's sort of how it goes. I think a lot of times I'll go out for a run. Like, yeah, I'll be like, I gotta write. So like I don't feel like doing it yet. So like, hopefully like on my next run, like I'll think about, like, my runs are like, they're like brainstorming sessions. So it's like, oh, I have to write this article, so I should like think about this stuff while I'm out. And it's not always that way. Like sometimes it'll be like something hits me maybe on a run, or I don't know, just while I'm doing something one day, and I'll have it and I'll be like, oh, okay, this is what I want. And I'll know that like much more in advance. And then maybe I'll start working on it. And then other times it's just kind of like all at the last minute. But I also like when I can grab ideas from like all these different places and then bring them all together. Because for me, that's really fun and really neat to do. I remember I was writing this article for Iron Far one time, and I had something like, I had like my topic or like a draft, and it was going, like I was working on it, but it was like there was something missing. I don't know if I knew there was something missing, but it was like there's something missing. And then I was out on a run one day, and I like had this moment where I think I had a run where I kind of almost lost it and fell, like coming down like a technical section, like on a rock or something. And it was like the light bulb went off, and I realized that like that moment right there, like that feeling that I get of like, it's like that feeling when you're like down climbing something, or like running down like a steep like rock, something more technical, not just like a little rock, like a big rock. And you like almost, maybe you're having to like, it's kind of like a mix of scrambling and down climbing and running all at the same time. And you have those moments where like you kind of start to lose it. And then it's like, you kind of just like, all of a sudden you kind of like just trust it and take one more step, and like you find your way out. But it's like, it was very nearly really bad, but then you just kind of like, you save it. And it like hit me. I was like, oh, that's for this article. Like, that's what I was like, that's what my brain was like getting at. Like, that's where I was going that I didn't know I was going. And then I like went back and I like finished that article. And I think it may have been one where I pulled ideas from like all these different areas, but somehow got it all to come together. And that's always really fun. And it doesn't always happen like that. But I like when I can do that. Like, I don't know, if I can take like a song I've been listening to and a running experience and a quote from some book that I've been reading, and somehow they can all come into the same central message. Like, that's really fun. Um, but yeah, so that's just like, sometimes the process is a little like that, and sometimes it's a little more straightforward.
Yeah. I just find it, like, as I said, I've read a lot of your stuff, and there's so much content out there to read and go through. And sometimes I just catch myself reading the first 3 lines, and then I'm in, and I'm just like, damn, this is, some things come to you at the right time and all of that. And I'm like, whoa, this is some great thought. And like, I was just thinking, you wrote one of your most recent articles. I think I got it in my inbox, like on the just at the end of December, I think. And it's called Outside the Box. And
Oh yeah.
And the central theme, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to summarize your work or anything, but I really wanted to just read this little bit out, because like, and speak to what you were saying about, like, kind of like that central theme and nailing that message. And I'll just read this bit because I'd love for you to just kind of like take it that next step further. And so I quote, oh, by the way, also I Run Far, they just had a little change up in the way they're going to do things going forward, which is super exciting. Big shout out to Megan and Brian. That's exciting news.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that was a big step for them.
Yeah, I think, it really is incredible, hey, from it's being so independent to taking that next step. But I think it's gonna be incredible for getting their incredible work to the eyes of more people, for sure. It's gonna be sweet. Sorry, mate, sidetrack there. Thought I'd better mention it before I forget.
No, it's all good.
So I quote your work here when I say, "It is the pursuit of this security that can be dangerous. I feel that if we look for it in the wrong places, like running or work or social media, we'll find ourselves in a never-ending race. But if we can take a step back and find fulfillment in chasing our passions, joy in the lines that we trace across the earth, and an approval given independent of success, then we win. Maybe not in terms of the podium or the follower count, but in something bigger. I guess what I'm saying is this. Can you run, ski, or do nothing at all and still be satisfied? Can you be happy outside of the box?" So end quote, of course, and ending that. But Zach, that's pretty epic, coming from someone who seemingly has the whole world of opportunity at your feet with regards to your running career, your ability to travel and race, and also your ability to get those achievements such as standing on the podium. And I just would love for you to kind of maybe go a little bit deeper on that, and just like, why do you think that?
Yeah. I think when I was writing this article, it was like, I was trying to like get a lot of my thoughts in regards to like our relationship with social media. That's like the reference to the box. That we're kind of all stuck with our heads in this little social media square, and searching for our fulfillment. Because I think for me, I kind of struggle with social media in my head. In my own head, like I kind of go back and forth between like, I just want to like throw it all away and be a hermit, and just like, I don't need to share all this stuff. I don't need to be like spending so many hours a day, looking at what everyone else is doing and like showing what I'm doing. I just like want to be present in my own moment. But then I also see the value of like sharing it and creating this community, and people getting all stoked and being like, "Oh, you inspired me to do something cool." So I think I was just trying to, like, this article was kind of trying to tackle that whole beast, and I guess realizing that the box itself isn't necessarily bad. Like the social media isn't necessarily bad. It's more like, what is our intention with it? What are we seeking from it? If we're caught up in it because we're really just seeking approval, which is the same in racing. If we're only racing because we're looking for approval, and if approval is like first place, so we're saying, okay, I'm running because I like to run, but you take a deeper look and you're like, well, no, I'm really running because I want to win, because winning makes me feel approved and that makes me feel valuable. And I'm posting on Instagram because I want to check how many people see it, how many people like it. And then that's going to make me feel good about myself. And then that will make me, it's like, oh, if I can just get like one more, if I can just get another 1,000 followers, I'll feel like I'm something, but it's this like rabbit hole that like, it's not there isn't really an end to it. Like you just keep seeking it. It's like, it's never really enough, right? Like you can win 1 million races and it's still, I feel like you're still going to have that. You'll win a big race and you'll feel good. And then like a few days later, you'll be like, okay, what's the next thing I can win? Because I need to feel validated again. And I think that's what I was getting at with this article. And with that line that you quoted there specifically, I guess that was kind of like what I narrowed in on in conclusion of the article, was that like there needs to be something in your life that like you're happy without all of this stuff. Like your happiness and your satisfaction can't come from this stuff, because this stuff is like very, like, sure, it's real, it makes you feel good, but it's very kind of fleeting or like never ending or superficial. There needs to be something more that you're after to truly be satisfied. And then if you can just be happy in whatever that is, then you can still have this other stuff and use it in a healthy way, but you're not chasing that stuff because you need satisfaction, if that makes sense. To take it, I probably use a lot of analogies, but like the Super Bowl is coming up in America and Tom Brady is playing for his 10th Super Bowl, which is, ridiculous. And everybody, basically, like, either you're a Tom Brady fan or you hate Tom Brady. It's basically how it goes in America. And I said to my brother-in-law yesterday, because the Brady and the Bucks were playing the Packers, and I was like, oh, I want the Packers to win, but I was like, actually, there's a part of me that would be happy to see Tom Brady win, because like he's 43, so I'm like, and he's won, I think, 6 Super Bowls. So I was like, he obviously doesn't need to hang around to win a Super Bowl. He's done it like 6 times. So I like to think that the guy is still around because he really just likes to play football. And that is like, I don't know if that's the case. I was like, maybe he's addicted and he just can't leave. But I like to think that he's here because he just really likes playing football. And if you can still play in the NFL at 43 and be going to the Super Bowl again, I mean, that's pretty cool. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like that, do well, because it probably makes him, happy, and he's just doing what he enjoys. Now, I don't know if that's his motivation, but like, I guess that's kind of like, if he's really just playing because he just enjoys playing, then that's pretty cool. Like, that's kind of how we should be. Like, we should be doing it because it's like what we enjoy doing, not because like we feel like we need to go to our 10th Super Bowl, or because we feel like, if he doesn't feel validated by now, I don't know when he's ever going to feel validated. Totally. So, I just like, that was kind of like, I didn't see myself explaining it that way. But like, I guess that in a sense, that was a little bit of like what I was after. Like, there needs to be something more than just like the win or the follower count that you're after, because those things they're never really gonna satisfy you. And yeah, and if Tom Brady's still around because he's not satisfied, well, then I guess that's kind of a case in point. But if he's around for the love of the game, then that's also a case in point of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. No, I like it, man. I think it's a great analogy to use. It's certainly makes things pretty clear, like for me especially. Like it's it kind of brings up the question, what are you going to be doing when you're 70, Zach? Are you going to be jogging up trails?
I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I think it just, life changes so much as it goes that, I hope that when I'm 70, I'm doing something that makes me happy, something, and hopefully something that helps some other people and makes some other people happy as well. But I don't know. I hope it's jogging up trails. Like, I hope I'm like, when I worked at bar camp, we had all these like retired people, and we had some people who were pretty up in their years, and they would come to bar camp like once a week or twice a week. And it's kind of like, that's kind of what I want to be when I grow up, was just like that old guy who goes to camp and like talks to the caretakers halfway up the mountain like every week, like, or is out in like the local 5K turkey trot at Thanksgiving, like trying to set an age group record, like, just still like, just still loving the sport and loving being out and active. It makes me think, my best friend, Brandon Stepanovich, he lives in Colorado Springs, and he sent me, like the other month, he sent me a thing about the age group records at the Pikes Peak Marathon, because he's like, me and one of his friends, I think it was Wes, he's like, me and Wes have decided we're going to go after all these records. And it's like all the age group records for the Pikes Peak Marathon. And he's like, yeah, he's like the 16, I forgot, he's like the 65 to 69 one looks pretty soft, like for like 65 to 69-year-old record. So yeah, I think that would be awesome, like a culture of like old guys in Colorado Springs chasing down the Pikes Peak Marathon, like training like crazy to like beat each other in the Pikes Peak Marathon at the age of like 70. That would be pretty rad.
What a story that would be, hey? That would be so good. You could play that on the news any night.
Yeah, for sure. People would love it. Like, I always get a kick out of those like lifelong fitness folks. There's a guy from Pennsylvania actually who goes up every year to the Mount Washington Road Race, and he's like, I think he's in like his 80s or 90s now. And I mean, it's just incredible. Like, he's not fast. Like, I mean, the guy is like, he's old. Like, he's old enough that you can say he's old, and I feel like it's acceptable. Yeah. And it's just, it's like one of the most amazing performances of the whole day. Like, like Joe Gray may win the whole thing, but like this guy, like, he's like, he kind of steals the show. Like, I remember seeing him one year going up, and he's working so hard, and I'm like, he's not, like, maybe that's just the effort that it takes him to get up there, but like, from my perspective, it doesn't look like, it looks like he's racing, like he's not going fast, but he looks like he's giving it everything he has. And maybe that's what it takes just for him to get up there. Or maybe he's also like still just has his like competitive fire, and he's like, I'm going to go up as fast as I can. And it might be like a 30-minute mile pace, but like, that's what he's going to do.
Far out, hey? It's so awesome. That is the kind of stuff that is just the greatest, right? Like you say, there are these people that win the race, and they win every race. And, I'm not sure how often you get asked the question of like, oh, what motivates you, what inspires you. But for me, when I get asked that question, I'm like that person who doesn't look like a typical, like someone who would be out running, and they look and they're just covered in sweat, and they're just like, it just looks like they're going against the grain, and they're doing it, and they're just doing it. Like that is just so awesome. And like friends that you're like, oh, do you want to go for a jog? And they're always like, oh, I can't run with you. That would, I'll slow you down, blah, 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 or this and that. And then when they do it, and they're like, okay, I'll come out, like I'll get out there. And it's nothing miraculous about it in terms of the stats and all of that crap. But your friend who never runs is out there on a run with you. It's like the most fulfilling thing. It's so awesome, hey? Just like that gentleman, seeing that, it's just like, yes, get after it. That's so good.
Yeah, it is. I love just seeing people getting out and just getting after it, just living their lives. Even if it's like not competitive, just like being out on the trails. Yeah. And a lot of those people, like, they'll never tell you what they've done. Like, they're the biggest sleepers. There was this Asian woman, Anne Han was her name, or is her name, and she'd come up to bar camp all the time. And she was very up there in her years. But she was so unassuming, like on the trails, she would just go her pace, basically like stop and smell the roses pace, like just wander about. But like, if you would talk to her, like it was just so impressive. Like I got to realize, I was like, when we see Anne, like she's out here like all day, because I would have days when I'd like run down to town for something, like to check the mail or something. And I'd see Anne in town at maybe like 8 a.m. And then I'd maybe run some errands and stuff, and then I'd run back up, and I'd pass her again, and so that she would be starting at like 8 a.m. and I'd pass her on my way home at maybe like 3 in the afternoon, or 4 in the afternoon. And I started to realize, I was like, wow, like Anne she basically spends her whole day outside. Like, maybe not every day, but like the days where she comes to see us, like she's basically spent probably all day doing this. And then like every now and then I'd catch her up above tree line, because she'd be actually summiting Pikes Peak. And it would just be, I'd be like, and she still summits Pikes Peak, not all the time, but like, I think usually at least once a year. And then if you talk to her, I think she's done every 14er in Colorado, which is, all the peaks that are 14,000 feet or taller. And then she's done, I think she's hiked around Mont Blanc, and it's just super impressive, like the stuff she's done, but she'll never like tell you if you don't ask her. She might talk about it in passing or something, but she's like, you just kind of see her as this old woman, and then you realize, no, she's like one of the biggest crushers on the mountain. She just has a lot of years under her belt, and she's still going.
Oh, that is so good, hey? Oh, I love that, man. We need to get Anne on the podcast, I reckon. Yeah,
you should.
Give her a platform.
She learned what I did. She eventually, I don't know how she figured it out, but she learned about my running, and then she became like, then she really became a fan. She figured out about my running, and then she would watch, I think she'd watch like the YouTube videos, and then somehow she found my writing. So then she would go on and she'd read my articles, and it was really pretty funny. Like, I was like, oh, Anne is like really studied up on me as like that, because she knew me as the caretaker, and then she like delved in and learned all this stuff about me as a runner. It was kind of funny.
She became a super fan of Zach.
Yeah, I guess so. But like, I was a super fan of her. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Zach, I know this is sometimes frowned upon in the interview world, but I want to backtrack on something you mentioned before about approvals and
Yeah.
how you're in a race and you win a race, and it like links to that approval of the community or your peers and that sense of being accepted and that sense of approval. I was having this conversation the other night actually with a friend, and I we were talking about, what holds you back from doing the things that you love in life and what makes you do a lot of the things. And we came to the exact same conclusion as what you spoke to just before: approval, acceptance, and that drives a lot on a deeper level. On the surface level, it seems like, yeah, it's because I want to get this time or win a race. But when you delve deeper, it's like because you want the approval of the people that you know and also the people that you don't even know. But then I kind of thought, well, what's the level down below that? Because that can't be the end if you look into it further. And we kind of started to discuss, well, actually, in some way, it's you wanting to seek approval and acceptance from yourself. And it's got nothing to do with anyone else, because you, when you're by yourself, you still don't accept who you are as a person, and you still don't approve of who you are as an individual. Um, does that resonate with you? Do you think, like, what's your take on that? Because that's where I got to, and I was a little bit kind of taken aback. I was like, damn, like, oh, I've still got a lot of work to do on myself and what I do, because there is a level of not accepting who I am.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, like that could be like sort of, I'm just kind of like thinking out loud. That could be like more of the root of what we're seeking than it could be that the approval from others is really just sort of like a false approval of ourselves. Like, well, if he approves of me, then I approve of myself because he approves of me, or like if all these followers think I'm cool, then I think I'm cool, but maybe you actually don't think you're cool. Maybe it's just like a temporary, like, okay, those guys like me, so that makes me like myself. But then like a day later, you're like, well, I don't feel like I like myself anymore, and then you have to go seek their approval again to make you feel like you like yourself again. So if you can get down to that core of like, no, I just like myself. Like I'm okay, like I'm secure in who I am and where I'm at, then, then you don't have to chase their approval anymore. Then you can just be good with where you're at. Like, I think that's a hard place for people to get to, like the point where they're just like, no, I like where I'm at and I'm cool. I'm cool with myself. I'm cool if I succeed and I get the win or, or whatever you're chasing. And I'm also cool with myself if I don't. Like, sure, I think you can be satisfied with yourself and still be disappointed because, like, I don't know, I just feel like that's realistic. Like, you chase something and you're like, okay, I'm disappointed I didn't get it, but it doesn't change the way I feel about like myself at a deeper level. And I think that's like a healthy, if you can get to that place, that's very healthy, but I think it's hard to get to that place. Like, I probably struggle to get to that place. I really like that thought process, that thought that you shared there about that. But I think that would be a really freeing thing if you could get to that point.
Totally, yeah.
I get asked a lot about like racing style, and I guess I've expressed in like in it being interviewed before that like if you can free yourself of like that need to like kind of like win, like if you can just like you just want to like I tend to be very aggressive in races. So if you can get to that point where it's like I'm just gonna go all in and I don't care what happens, because I'm just really curious to see what happens if I go all in. And like, if I go all in and by chance I can hang on, you know, the outcome's going to be like so fantastic. It's going to be like really like crazy, you know, and I want to see if that can happen. But you kind of have to do that. But doing that is really risky. So it's just like, it helps if you can just you kind of have to admit that, okay, this might totally blow up, but I'm going to take the risk. And I think that's like, I've explained that before as like being I don't know that if I've ever fully like embraced that to the point where I'm comfortable, because I always still care. I still care if it blows up, and that's always really hard to deal with. But like, I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy enough to like run with it anyways and just deal with it if it blows up. But like, if you can get to that point where it's like, you don't care if it blows up, then it's super freeing, because then it's like, oh man, now I can do whatever I want, because like, I'm not tied to needing to win. Where I think it would be similar with your own self-approval, if you can get to that point where you're like, no, I just like who I am and I just like what I'm doing, then you can kind of do whatever you want. And it's like the blowing up thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I can just be me and I don't care if these people approve of it. And then that would be a super freeing thing. And then I think as an athlete, that would, not that it has to be geared to an athlete, but like for an athlete, I think then that would also open up an opportunity to chase some really, really cool things. Because you're like, my security or my satisfaction or my happiness is no longer tied to the success, because I already have it. So like, now I can just go crazy, you know, and chase these really big goals, because if I don't get them, I'm still going to be okay with myself. But I think that's really hard for most people, because most of us, once we don't get what we're shooting for, we're super bummed. And for some of us, the fact that we're bummed then drives us to try again, you know. So for some people, I think they feed off of that, and it becomes a really strong source of fuel. Like, they fail and they're so bummed that they failed. They're super motivated to go try again. And that can lead to great things too. But I think what would be also powerful and probably healthier mentally is if you're so secure in yourself that you can just chase it just as hard and not be depressed if you don't get it, and then just chase it again, because it's like, it's what you like to do.
Yeah. I think that is a formula to strive for, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be. I think it's always like easier said than done, you know?
Totally.
Like, you can watch sports on TV and be like, oh man, I love this athlete, because he just like, he doesn't seem to care. Like, he's fun to watch because, you know, or she's fun to watch because she just goes for it. Like, and it's easy to watch that, but it's hard to be that person, you know, because most of us aren't secure enough to really be happy if it doesn't go our way. But like, from the fans' perspective, I think it's like, you know, that, like, I don't know, like, I was pretty jazzed on like Jens Voigt when he rode, because he just kind of had that, like, you know, crazy side, and it was like, this guy's great. Like, he just goes. I'm trying to think what other athletes were like, you know, were like that. But yeah, it was just like, you know, it's just, I think it's probably a kind of unique thing. You only find so many people who are like that, and it's a rarity, but every now and then, there's athletes who are really great because they're really good at dialing things in and winning. And then there's also athletes who are like equally as entertaining because they don't necessarily win, but it's just like the level of how much of themselves they give is just like above. It's just like above and beyond. Like, I love Jessie Diggins, the Nordic skier from the US. Like, she just won what'd she win? It was like the Tour de Ski. She was like the first American, I think, to ever win it. And I don't even like follow her super closely, but I feel like I've seen so many finish line videos and pictures of her just like totally collapsed, like exhausted at the finish. Like she's just totally went to the well and emptied every last drop of herself. And I just like, I'm a sucker for that. Like I love that style.
Yeah, well, I think you're definitely in the latter category that you described just before, like, the entertainment and emptying the well. Actually, I was chatting to Dylan just before we had our conversation today, and I said, "Oh, Dylan, because Dylan and I have spoken a lot. Dylan Bowman, that is, and he put us in contact. Thanks, Dylan. And he's working really hard on his new app Pillars, and the Pillars app is a lot about physical and emotional fitness, and that emotional fitness component, I think, just bleeds into that whole game of acceptance and approval and being pretty centered and okay with yourself, and working on that. There's a lot of work involved in that, almost more so than the physical work of training physically for events like 100 milers and whatever. And yeah, he did say, I said, are you got a question for Zach that you want me to ask? And he just said, does he feel pain? And I think because you're in the latter category and you like the lady you just described, I think a lot of people must look at you and the style in which you race and just like, does that guy feel pain? Is there anything going on there? Or
yeah, no, I definitely feel pain. I just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think it was after like that year that Hayden and I raced each other at North Face. That video has gone pretty, I don't know if viral is the right word, but got a lot of views on YouTube. And I think that's some of the deepest I've ever dug in a race. Like, I think that's maybe the deepest I've ever dug in a race while still holding it together. Like, I mean, it was kind of falling apart and holding. I was basically like a rocket ship, like rumbling through the sky, being held together on shards of like duct tape and dental floss. Like everything was about to snap and like break loose, but like somehow it held on. That was like how the last like 10 miles of that race were. But yeah, I definitely feel pain. Like I guess, what I was getting at was I think it was maybe after that race, David Roche made a comment about like, I don't know, like if they could measure my like my pain tolerance or my pain threshold or something, like what it is. But I think that'd be a fascinating thing if that could be measurable. But I just like, I feel like we haven't really come up with a way to measure that. And I'd be interested to know like what mine is. Like, is it abnormal or is it normal? And I just put up with a lot more pain. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, I have a PT friend in Colorado Springs, and I feel like she's always like, whenever I feel like when I go to her for advice and stuff, she always, like, if she has to explain me to a doctor she's recommending, I feel like she's always inclined to give a little disclaimer of like, well, this is the issue Zach's dealing with, but like, he also like, I don't know, like look at him because he also might like, if he tells you he's in pain, like his scale is probably so drastically different from everyone else's that like, if he says he's a 5, it might be someone else's 10.
Yeah.
So like, but I don't know. I have no clue, but I mean, in short for Dylan, like, yeah, I definitely feel pain. I don't know if I'm just really good at dealing with it or suppressing it or maybe I sadistically like it.
Yeah, there's a number of things going on there.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting, that whole space, the psychology of it, I feel like is it's just like a rabbit hole, and there's probably about 95 of them, and they just go everywhere. Like, what's your relationship and your experience with something like higher, be it like religion or a spiritual belief? Do you have a connection to something of like a greater existence? And like, do you have like a spiritual religious existence within your life?
Yeah. I mean, I would have grown up in a Christian home, so like I identify myself as a Christian, as a follower of Christ. But that has been like a interesting thing for me, like the past few years. I think like in my early years when I was young, it was always just kind of like, it's just kind of the culture I was brought up in. My family, we went to church, this was what we believed, this was what we did. It wasn't that anything was forced on me. It was always like my own choice, to whether to like believe in it or follow it, what have you. But it was also just very part of like how I grew up. It was the people around me believed these things. We went to church and the people there believed these things. And you went through like high school, and I feel like usually like when you'd be in high school, you'd hear people talk about like, well, this is really something that needs to become your own. Like it can't just be something you do because like your parents do it. It's something you have to like wrestle with in your own mind and make your own. And I feel like some people maybe did that when they were in like high school or college. But lately I felt like I basically just always, I never had like a point in those years where I really doubted it. I just thought it was just how I was raised, and it was just what I thought was right and good, and I always followed. But then I guess like lately, so I kind of feel like I'm like way late to the game in some of my spiritual development in that sense. But like lately, I just found myself like asking myself a lot of questions. And so it's like still this part of my life that's very important to me, but I just have like a lot more questions now. I'm just like, stuff that would have been more black and white to me growing up, like, okay, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, is now much more gray to me. Now I'm like, well, okay, but why is like you say that's right and this is wrong, but like, why is that? Like, I just look at stuff, I guess, more, I don't know, skepticism. I just kind of like, I don't necessarily just accept stuff, feel like I should accept stuff just because anymore. Now it's more like, well, is this actually good? And like, what do I really think here? And like, why would this be? Because like, if you look through teachings and things, it's like, well, there's some things we still live by, there's some things we don't. So like, how are we picking and choosing here? And like, what are we really supposed to be taking away from all of this? So I guess that's kind of like my personal path so far, is just kind of like asking a lot of questions and like, kind of analyzing what I've grown up with and be like, where does this fit in with what I really like believe? And like, is this all stuff that like I really believe? And I think sometimes when people in like a faith or a spiritual journey, they get to that point, sometimes they feel like a fraud, or they feel like, oh, there must be something wrong because I'm having these questions. But I don't think so. I think that's actually like a really good point to be in, and to be like, no, we should ask these questions, because if we're gonna believe it or not believe it, like we need to know why, or like we need to come to terms with it. So I think it's actually like, it's actually like it can actually be like a really good thing, and people don't need to feel like shameful for having those questions. And I guess that all like does all connect back to my running. Like, in the past, I would have explained that sometimes like the act of running and being outdoors sometimes feels like a closer connection for me spiritually than like sitting in a church service does. which, I mean, they can both have a positive effect, but sometimes I might just be like out in the mountains on a run and I'm like looking at everything there is, and it's just like I feel a deeper connection in that than I do in other more like traditional ways of, other more traditional elements of like a spiritual journey. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like a spider web of thoughts there for you. But like, yeah, there is definitely this spiritual side of myself, and how, and kind of how, I guess kind of how I view the world per se. But really right now it's just kind of like I'm in this spot where I'm kind of just trying to figure it out. Like it's important to me, but I have a lot of questions, and that's kind of like where I'm at.
Have you come to, like, what would your answer be to the question right now in this moment, like this, where you're at? What would your answer to the question, what is it all about? What would that be right now?
What is it all about? Like life, or like just life? Yeah.
What is it? What is it?
Yeah. I think that's a big question. I feel like I'm trying not to give like a canned answer of like what I would just like stereotypically say. I think life is about like finding. It's about like finding your way of how to be productive and give back to like a higher cause, to like be a good steward of everything that you've been given. We're all very unique and gifted in different ways. And I think it's about like figuring out how to take, like, because no matter what you believe, whether you're an atheist or you're Buddhist, or I think we could all agree that we've all somehow come to exist. We've all somehow been given a life to live, and so it's very much about finding a way to take that life and be a good steward of it, in whatever that means. And that's kind of like a vague, wishy-washy way, like not a very specific answer, I guess. But it's just, I guess I don't know if there is a real specific answer. It's more, because like the path kind of looks different for each of us, even if like the goal is kind of the same. Like what it looks like for me to be a good steward of my life isn't necessarily the same as what it looks like for you to be a good steward, or for my friends to be a good steward of their lives, or like just anybody. We just all kind of have a different journey. But if we can all figure out how to be a good steward, then I think that then we somehow kind of like fulfill our purpose in life. Like we make we each have this little space, like in all of life, we each have our little piece of life. And if we can each find a way to use our piece of life the best we can, then, and everybody does that, then all of life becomes better, and I guess that's kind of, and for some people that would be like living in a life that like shows thanks and gratitude and like to like your creator, like who you believe created you. But I think like even if that's what you believe, that kind of fits within the broader scope of what I originally described. if that makes sense.
Mate, I think I hear you there, and I appreciate you taking the time and the thought to try and answer that question to the best that you can right now. And I think it's not wishy-washy at all. I mean, and it's not vague, because it's how you're feeling right now. I think it's great. Like, I think I can resonate to a lot of that. I'm sure a lot of other people do. But there's no right or wrong answer to it. It's just putting out what you think of it right now, and what you feel of it too. Because I think, our heads can get in the way a lot, and it doesn't allow us to really kind of tap into that deeper intuition that we have as kind of like like as an animal, as a species. And so anyway, thanks, mate. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that was a tough question, but no, thanks. Those are good questions, because it really makes you think.
Yeah. Well, I think I
and
just got one back on you.
And then you keep thinking, huh?
I think I just got one back on you after reading your articles numerous times. I'm left sitting there at a desk just being like, and it's the end of the article, and I'm like, damn, like, I'm gonna have to think about this now.
No, but that's what we went. I mean, what we want, it goes back to that whole politics discussion. Like, we need to think about stuff and ask ourselves the hard questions.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's kind of like full circle on that. I guess, like, I'd love to know as well, like, with all that being said, it sets a pretty solid framework and a pretty solid way to go forward from this day on. How like, what would success look like for you over the next 5 and 10 years in regards to your, like, running life and that world that you exist in the athletic world, and also speaking towards what success would look like for that greater sphere and that greater good, like what would that 5-10 year kind of, what would the next period of the phase look like for you, if in a successful way?
Yeah. Well, in terms of running and my running career, I think, well, the big thing on my mind right now is I had a surgery this year to remove a Haglund's deformity. So I've actually been quite hampered by my foot for quite a while now. I have done quite a bit of running. I have done a fair amount of running and even some racing, but I haven't really felt 100% for a while. So at the forefront of my mind is like, I have to fix this injury, like, before I can be truly successful. And so that's a work in progress at the moment. But I think given all
Zach, can I jump in and just, like, pick that for, like, because what does success look like for you? Like, when you say for you to fix the injury and then become successful, like, what would success look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's kind of two parts, like, of everything we've discussed, like, I'm still very human. So part of my brain is still wired to define success as, like, winning a race, So there's part of me that's like, oh, I have to fix this injury and be successful by getting back to racing and winning a race or doing really well in a race, getting a podium. So part of my brain is still, I'm still very much wired that way. Like, that would be successful. But I think, given what we've just discussed, there's another part of me that's like, well, that would only be like an element of success. It wouldn't necessarily be, true success. I mean, it would be success, but it would be success in kind of a different form. So then I think a real big success would be just like, it would be successful if I could just, like, get to a point where I'm really happy, even if I still have the injury. I don't know if that'd be successful from all perspectives of my career, but there would be an element of success there if I'd be like, oh, I'm hurt, but I still have all these other things in my life that I am happy about, and I am still like, I'm still good with myself. But since my career is kind of tied to sponsorships that are kind of tied to doing well at races, it does feel like that element of my life kind of requires a good race performance to be successful in that regard. So there'd be kind of like that. I guess you could break it up. There'd kind of be that like professional level of success, which would be getting healthy, getting back to racing well. That would be like the professional level of success. And then there would be the level of like personal success that would be like, well, okay, if this heals or doesn't heal, can I still be like happy and satisfied with myself, and still growing as a person? That would be a success on a personal level. And then if I can heal the injury, can I get back to just like, getting out there and enjoying the trails and just being happy, like just enjoying the sport, and just basically back to what we said, where we're satisfied regardless of whether we get the goal or not. Like we just kind of like pursue it, and then we're just satisfied in the pursuit of it. And if we get it, it's just kind of the cherry on top. I think that would be like a personal level of success. If I could break through to that point that we're talking about, the freedom of just like, I'm so satisfied, like I'm so secure in myself that I don't need the win to validate myself. I'm just fine with like giving it my best. And then if my best is a win, great. If my best falls apart, then that's okay too. So I guess that would be like the personal level of success. But usually those aren't the levels of success that, you write down in an email to a sponsor or something like that. They don't, as much as you'd like them to, yeah. they don't seem to have too many monetary metrics tied to that type of success.
Unfortunately.
Be like, but I'm really happy.
Not yet anyway.
Yeah, not yet anyway. Yeah, I mean, maybe in some indirect ways they might, but yeah. So I guess that would be kind of like in the sport and with the injury. I think there was another part to that question. I
guess like how success looks for you in terms of like the greater picture. But you've kind of spoken to
and
that,
then like but I would throw something else in there. So like I feel like it goes in line with like your question about like what is the purpose of it all or whatever, and I said that it's like being a good steward. So I think success over like the next 5-10 years would also be in the form of finding an avenue to give back. So like when I was at bar camp, like that occupied a lot of my time serving as a caretaker. So it kept me really busy, but it was also kind of like, it was my job, but it was also like a way of giving back, because I just got to like help so many people, experience the mountain. And so it was kind of like this mandatory giving back, it's just like part of my lifestyle. But now that I'm not there anymore, I'm more in this lifestyle where it's much easier to just focus on like myself and my day-to-day and my training, and like, what do I need? And so I think in the long term, 5-10 years, like success would also be like, okay, I achieved all these personal goals, but what did I do for anyone else? Like, did I start up a nonprofit, or did I run a clinic for kids to help them get into trail running and the outdoors, or, did I give back to my community in some way? Did I volunteer? Stuff like that. So I think I would love in like 5 to 10 years to be able to look back and be like, oh, look, I left bar camp. And then when I left bar camp, I found all these other ways to be involved in my community, or, to give back to my sport, or, to get more people involved in my sport. And that would be a really big marker of success for me. I've heard Max King talk. He does his camp now for kids, his youth running, like trail running camps. And I think he said like that in the past, like several years, that's like one of the things he's most proud of, that he's done. And I think that's really awesome. Like Max is a really good, he's a really good representative of the sport, not only performance wise, but also just like a lifelong career of like really good achievements. And then also now like with these kids programs, helping younger kids get out on the trails. I think this winter he like took a young kid down to the Grand Canyon and they ran like rim to rim together. And that's just like, that's just an awesome thing. He's bringing the younger generation up with him. And that's really cool.
Yeah. I couldn't, yeah. I know, like a lot of people it's funny, Zach, a lot of people kind of actually get a bit peed off when you have podcast conversations and you agree with what the guest says, and they send in messages and say, why don't you get someone on that you disagree with and you stop agreeing with everyone you have? Like, that's not really good. And I was like, well, I can't help but agree with what you just said. So like, I think it's great. It's just a funny
good
thing.
Yeah, I'll have to try and come up with something that you don't agree with.
Yeah, I need to branch out from speaking to good people, and not that a difference of opinions is a bad people thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'd love to, like we've been going on a while now, and I just am so, again, appreciative of your opinion and things. And I just wanted to ask a couple more things, and one would be, with the writing that you do and the way that you go about, being inquisitive and curious about what we think and what we do in life, how do you view our role in the space of protecting wild places and, like our impact on the environment? And I ask you this because, like myself, I've done a lot of traveling related to running and races and doing all the fun things and all the sparkly things. It's actually funny, like I've known of you for quite a while, and doing like a little bit more research just before the podcast. It's so interesting. And I think this probably isn't too relevant for anyone else but you. I studied engineering, and then I started to get into ultra running and trail running. At the same time, I worked offshore and did all my training on a treadmill. And then during that time I worked offshore, I would fly back to the mainland and then fly over and I spent weekends in Chamonix and like running around there. And then I'm like, damn, Zach studied engineering. They did all this training offshore, and then he went to Chamonix. I'm just like, this is so weird. It's so weird. And then, obviously we've taken very different paths. We race very, very, very differently, one being more successful than the other. And then, but I guess like what I'm asking is, there's a lot of impact associated with the environment, and we exist in the environment. That's where we get a lot of love out of life and running. And how do you play that game of balance, and what's your relationship with trying to protect the wild places that we recreate in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for one, like the wild places, that we run in and adventure in are, they're very, very special. Like it's not like we have backups of them, like we only get, like they're all unique, and there's only one of each of them. So we can't, and there's only one Earth. So, we got to take good care of it. I think my years at bar camp were kind of like, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. It was kind of like cheating in a sense. because like the bar camp lifestyle was very, it wasn't that it didn't have an impact. Everything has an impact. I'll say that first out. Like, I think it's very easy as a human being or as an athlete to feel like a little like overwhelmed or like it's a lost cause, because it's like everything, you're gonna have an impact on the earth. Like, you're gonna have an environmental impact basically no matter what you do. Like, you can always feel guilty for something. It'd be like, oh, but I drove my car today, or like, oh, I took a flight, like, oh, or like, oh, I ate a steak. Like, it's like, well, everything. So I think that as you approach this, there needs to be some room for grace, because it's like, well, the very act of being a human on the planet is impactful. So you're not going to get to like 100% of like, I didn't harm anything. But with that said, like, there's so much that we can do better than we are doing. And I think a large part of it is it just kind of takes more thought and more planning and more mindfulness. And so what I was saying about bar camp was like, bar camp was kind of like cheating, because I was kind of like forced into this environmentally friendly lifestyle where there was no road to where I lived, so I went in and out on foot. There was no electricity running to where I lived. So we were off the grid. We had solar. So if we used electric, we got from the solar. There was no water piped in. We got it from the creek. We piped it in the summer. We did have a line tapped into the creek, but like, there was no public water line that was dug in or anything like that. So everything, was like, the toilets were composting toilets. The laundry was done by hand. The heat came from the wood that we collected from the forest and burned in the wood stove. So everything was like very stripped down. And my truck sat in the parking lot for like weeks or months, and I occasionally drove it when I went to town. Like, so I had this very minimal, like, environmentally friendly lifestyle. And it was kind of the only option. So it was kind of easy in a sense. Like, it was labor intensive, but you didn't really have any other option. So it just made it easy for me to live like a more environmentally friendly life. But now leaving that and coming to town, it's just like, I realize it's like, like, there's a lot of waste that goes on in the normal day to day, especially in the American lifestyle. It's like, we run a million errands, and we jump in our car for pretty much every single one of them. And half of them could be taken care of in like one trip rather than 5 trips if we would just plan better. But the American lifestyle is like, oh, I need this, and it's not like planned out. And I'm like, we could like plan this better and like drive our car once for all these errands, or we could ride our bicycle, instead. And so there's a lot of things, that you can do. But I think it just takes like a lot more mindfulness and being conscious. And then when you go out in the outdoors, I think it's really important that we take care of the places. Like, in America, we have tons of places that are developed. So the places that aren't are like pretty special, and it only makes sense that we should take care of them, whether that's, some things are as simple as just like not littering and picking up other people's litter. And then it gets deeper in of like building trails in an environmentally responsible manner. In some places it means not traveling off trail. In some places off trail travel is okay. In other places it's not okay. And so it's just really being aware of like the impacts that you're having on the landscape and trying to do it in a really responsible manner. I guess it's like, it's a gift to be out there. So you should kind of approach it like you're a guest in someone else's home. Like, when you go into someone else's home, you try to be really respectful. So when you go into the outdoors, you're basically a guest in Mother Nature's home. So you want to take good care of it and be a good steward of it. And yeah, I think that's a super important thing, and a thing we should certainly all be doing our part to do. Um, and yeah, and everybody has their own way of navigating that. For some people, it's like doing a lot more local exploration just from their home and avoiding unnecessary travel, and being a good steward while they're out there. And for other people, they will do some travel, but maybe they make those travel choices strategically, and maybe they buy back carbon offsets or something like that. But I think the main thing is just to be mindful, and when possible, leave it better than you found it. That's a really good motto to go by.
Well said. I have to agree again. Yeah. No, it's there's a lot more information out there that suggests that we are well, it's no secret that like you said, we have an impact, and there's no escaping that anymore. Like it's plastered everywhere around us, and we can choose to ignore it or choose to accept the fact and then do something about it and play our small part. And if everyone does a really small little bit, it's going to add up, which will be hopefully a more positive future in many ways, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Hey, Zach, I just wanted to, I guess, give you opportunity, before we wrap it up. I feel like we could chat for a good while longer, but is there anything that you want to leave people to, I guess, think or ponder, or is there anything that you feel like you haven't been able to speak about that might be either kind of on your mind or that you've been considering lately?
The thing that kept popping into my head during this podcast actually was that, when you do these podcasts and things, it's easy to kind of try to, you feel like you should put on your best face and act like you have it together and stuff. But I wanted to make a comment that you asked me a lot about my writing and my articles and where that inspiration comes from. And basically pretty much all that stuff I'm writing is stuff that's on my mind because it's stuff that I'm also dealing with myself. So it's I might write an article that's encouraging and positive, about a tough topic, but basically that's probably an indication that it's a topic that I'm also struggling with. So the very thing I'm writing with, and people might read it and be like, oh yeah, this guy has a great outlook and a really healthy attitude towards this. Well, it's well, I'm writing that most likely because it's also something I'm kind of struggling with, or maybe really struggling with. So if I write about the box of social media and seeking approval, in the wrong places, that's probably because because I am doing the same, or I wonder if I'm doing the same, or, so I guess I just want to express that I'm not perfect by any means. And my journey with things is very real as well. So that's one thing I've kind of come to realize with sharing things is that a lot of times, sometimes on social media, people will share something and I'll be like, man, I'm really glad they shared that because I feel the same way. And now it makes me feel better because now I know they feel that way too. And it just gives you, and you just feel better when you're not the only one. And I've come to realize that if you feel something, there's probably a lot of other people who feel exactly the same way. And we tend to shy away from expressing that because we probably oftentimes you view it as a weakness. So you shy away from sharing it. But I think it can actually be, really beneficial to share it because oftentimes there's a million other people who are struggling with the very same thing. And just knowing that you're not alone in your struggle is really, really comforting. So yeah, that was the main thing on my mind.
Thanks for sharing that, Zach. I really deeply respect that willingness to share that and the vulnerability that's associated with sharing something like that. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the moment to make sure that you put that out there, because like you said, there's probably a million other people that feel the same way about the exact same issue and that situation we face. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to share it.
Yeah. No, very, very, very happy for you to share it. What other tools are in your toolbox for dealing with those situations where you might be struggling? Like I'd assume that writing is a pretty, in some ways a cathartic way of processing things and dealing with it. Do you do anything else for that emotional fitness side of things?
I thought, let's see. Sometimes it's kind of rare, but sometimes I just kind of chat. I just kind of talk it out with other people. Like I'm not somebody who does that a ton, but if I have like a big decision or something that's weighing on me, it usually like takes a bit for me to get to that point, but then I'll like have these points where I just like sit down and just kind of unload it on somebody, or whether it's written or verbally. So that can help a lot, like just getting someone else's, sometimes getting their perspective and sometimes just getting their ear. Like they just sit there and listen, and that's about it. So I guess that helps. It's not really like a regimented thing that I do on a regular basis or anything. Probably more just like when I've gotten to a point where I've bottled it up for too long, or there's like something pressing and I need to figure it out for some reason. Sometimes I just go out and like ride my bike really hard. Like yesterday I had this day where I was like, what did I do? I was supposed to go see a PT, and I was going to ride my bike over to see him, and I was kind of getting short on time. So, you're like, oh, I guess it started the night before. Like I was working on my bus that I'm building out, and I finally finished this like one piece, and I was going to like test out the vent that I built for my air conditioner, and I had it on, it was working, it was like great. And then I like tapped, a lot of the like wiring and stuff isn't real cleaned up yet. And I like tapped one of the wires against a metal bolt and like shorted the whole thing, like blew a fuse. And so like it all quit working, which wasn't a big deal. It's winter, I don't need it right now. But it was just kind of like, oh man, like now I just created one more problem. So I had that like the night before, and then the next morning, like my dad and I hunted for the fuse a little, didn't find it. I had to go to this PT appointment. So I'm like, now I'm getting a little short on time. So I'm rushing around trying to get out the door. I get like all my cycling gear on, which it's winter. So it's like, it's kind of a process just to get dressed. And I get out, I pick up my bike, and it's like, I look at the back tire and I have a flat tire, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I like go back inside, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to drive now. So I drive to the appointment, go to the PT, come home, and then I'm home, and now there's like a family meal planned for like 4:00. But then I get informed that like it might end up being like 3 or 3:30. And now I'm frustrated because I'm like, well, I had time to do this ride, and now I may not have time to do this ride. But I think my mom sensed my frustration. So then she was like, we'll do it at 4. She's like, it's okay. So, and then I go for my ride, and I go to zip up my booty, my cold weather booty for my cycling shoes, and the zipper busts. And I'm like, and these are all like minor things, but they're all adding up. Yeah. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like now my booty's broken, which it's fine. I just got some duct tape, and I just like duct taped my booty shut for the ride. And I just went out on the ride, and I just rode. I just not all out, but I just kind of rode hard. I just like kept the pedal down, and like my foot kind of bothered me, but I was like, my foot kind of bothers me, but my head bothers me a lot more right now. so I just went, and I was like, and by the time I was done, I was like, well, that feels good. Like I actually felt pretty fit, and I felt like I ran pretty fast. So now I at least at least my fitness ego feels good, and I got some of that junk out. And then from there on, the day got better.
Nice.
But some days it's like, I don't know if that's always the healthiest response, but some days that's how I also deal with stuff. Is like I just go out and like take it out, like on, in a physical sense. Like I just go run really hard or something.
Yeah. That all sounds very, very human, Zach.
Yeah, no, it is. Like I'm sure like a million people have done that same thing. But yeah, I'd say that's one of my tactics of how I get rid of the garbage.
Nice, man.
Just go run it out.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. I think it's, arguably, I think it's probably a little bit healthier than hitting the bottle and drinking it away. So
yeah.
At least that's on your side.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not that everyone hits the bottle, but it is a very common thing here in Australia, and I'd say in many other parts of the world.
Yeah, and it's never been a thing for me, so maybe that's like, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm just more practiced at some of the other methods than I.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know, but.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same. Sometimes there's been like a really bad moment in life, and in the culture here in Australia, it's like, well, let's get together and have a drink and get drunk and whatever. And every time that comes up, I'm like, you know what? I just want to go. I want to be outside. I want to go for a run. And like, oh, you're going to come back to so and so's place and have a beer, and I'm like, I'll meet you there. I'll run there. I'll see you there later on. And then, it's just, it's a very personal way of dealing with situations. But I mean, again, sorry, I agree with you. Resonate, all that jazz, and
yeah.
No, it's good, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think you're just human, mate, and the things that you write about resonate, and it's going to be really cool to see how you go from this day forward. Once your injury is all cleaned up and whatnot, and you're back on the road. It's going to be good to have a steward like yourself back in when the world opens up to be at all these events that you will hopefully be attending, and setting a great example for people.
In some ways I'm super grateful for the pandemic right now, because I'm out of commission for racing, so it really helps if you don't have that pressure of all the races. But
absolutely,
I do hope we make our way out of this pandemic, but But if there's a silver lining, I might as well take it.
Yeah, definitely. I tell you what, I've missed the community, and I've missed the trail and ultra running community, and the way it comes together at events so much during this time. I very much hope we can return to that kind of a situation and vibe again. That would be huge.
Yeah, for sure. I think we pretty much all want to get back out there. So.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, well, I'll just say like a big thanks again for taking the time, Zach. And it's just awesome to connect in this format in this way. And I look forward to catching up with you in person one day again. And having a nice long yarn, maybe over a root beer, about all the other great topics of life and all the things that we get posed.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. I hope things calm down and you can get back over here, or I can get over there, or we can meet in Chamonix or something and
totally
do that sort of thing.
Take care over there, man. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right, yeah.
See you,
Have
man.
A good
one. Bye. So there we go, everyone. Zach Miller. And I really hope you enjoyed the conversation and got something out of it. Thanks for joining us here at Stokely. Please let us know what you think of the conversation. It's always great to hear from everyone out there. And it's so rewarding to hear comments, even if they're recommendations more so than compliments. It's all very much appreciated. So again, I really hope you got something out of that conversation with Zach. He's a great person, very thoughtful in what he puts down on paper, and just like all of us, he's human, which is always great to know. So again, thanks a lot for joining us, and until next time, please keep well, and we look forward to seeing you next time for another episode of Stokely.